Fabulous. Anyway, right, thank you. For those of you that haven't met me before or weren't here for the opening 5-minute thingy, I am Tony Harmer, a specialist solutions consultant at Adobe UK, and I'm here to talk about UI, UX, and more importantly, Adobe Xd. So I am really going to, I'm not even going to bother going into Photoshop for part of this, because I'm going to stick with Illustrator just to start off with. Because people build things in all sorts of different tools. People use Sketch, people use Keynote, people use Photoshop, people use Illustrator, all sorts of things. And very few, if any, of those things were actually ever built for UI or UX work. They were built to do entirely other things. Photoshop, of course, was built almost 30 years ago, yeah, and the intention of modifying, adapting, and improving imagery, and then became a platform and a way for people to make imagery. So it went from adjusting imagery to creating it, and then, as you probably know, has broadened out into all different sorts of areas. One of which, as the term came into use and as the demand for it came into use, became UX, but never designed to do that work. Illustrator, 31 years old, similar story really, designed for you to create illustrations, the clue being in the name, of course, and has developed to do lots and lots of other things. People use it in UI work and people use it to create UX in here, but never designed to do that thing. People use it, however, it is a valid component of a UX workflow because it's very, very sophisticated and can achieve, with vectors, some really, really amazing effects. Once you've got something, some people work in Illustrator and then move it across into Photoshop and then add finesse to it in Photoshop. Largely unnecessary, by the way, in an awful lot of cases if you're not actually using raster imagery. But that kind of defeats the object, because if what we're aiming at is that whole multi-screen environment where we need things that can adapt to those environments, and of course vectors are the perfect thing for that. The minute you move them into Photoshop, you lose all of that stuff, and then you're into a renditions-based workflow where you've got to do things. And typically, of course, people have to do those things anyway, because that's what clients dictate. So Illustrator does have a couple of features, just before I move into XD, Illustrator does have a couple of features that can help you out that I'd like to point out. You're okay, it's cool, come on in. That I'd like to point out to you, show you, because you may well have missed them. Yeah? One thing in particular, actually, is that if I don't get to show you anything else, this will be the one thing I will show you. So I'm using one of the sticker sheets from Google Material here, which if you're working in UX already, you'll be very, very familiar with this. The fact that they make a sticker sheet for Illustrator shows that even Google use it, and actually I know they do use it. So, well, certainly the people I met at awards from Google, they use it anyway. But so here's the thing that you've probably missed, and it's one simple panel, and it's this, Asset Export. Have you come across this panel? Can you show me your hands if you have? Yeah, that's not too bad actually. Yeah, that's you know, more than half a dozen, which is really, really good, because in a lot of places I go to, they don't know that this exists, and their typical workflow when they want to export an asset is to isolate it out onto its own artboard, potentially, and then invoke Save for Web, which we've called now a legacy feature. Not entirely super happy with that. It's going to do the whole artboard. That's why it's taking just a moment there. It didn't matter about the selection. In fact, I can stop that going from there. But they do that, they export that out, and then they create other artboards for all of the other things and rinse and repeat that workflow. Not very flexible, not very dynamic. Photoshop has a similar mechanism, and Photoshop also has something called the generator, which when you enable the generator can export layers and groups of layers dynamically as you work on them. So you don't have to give it any further instructions. Once you've built out the layers you're going to be working on, you simply enable the generator, and the generator takes care of everything else, and it just keeps on generating the assets. If you've got a layer, for example, that is red and has an inner glow, and you take away the inner glow, it instantly re-renders the graphics that you're using from that. Works very, very quickly. And asset export works in a similar way. You can get asset export to work, if I just bring it out into the sort of center of your field of vision, you can get it to work with entire artboards, yeah, or you can bring it in at an asset level. And coming along shortly, there's going to be the powers of this particular panel are going to be extended. You can see that I just dragged in that artwork there. So just this button with this effect. So part of material is that nothing intersects, everything is on layers, as if you'd actually built it out of paper. So when you've got things that are active, for example, you change the amount of glow under them, which brings them towards you in the Z-index. If you've not looked into it, material is a lovely, lovely concept and thoroughly, thoroughly thought out. But I've dragged that into there, and of course, the only thing I'd have to do here would be to name this. So I'm just going to call that one plus just for now. And then I'll bring in this asset here, and I'll just bring in a few different things there like so. And you can see that underneath here, right, I've got the different ways that I can render this out. So I can save it as any one of these preset formats, and you can change that. Obviously, the number next to the JPEG is the quality setting that you can use along with that. But you can see SVG and PDF, because of course iOS 11 has a predilection towards PDF. So if you're putting stuff out, that's the preferred format for it. Pretty much the same way as the Apple operating system works. That works with a series of PDFs. InDesign, same thing. InDesign's made up of about 2,700 27,000 different PDFs in there that actually bring that interface together. So it's good architecture for doing that. So I can set that up, and I can add scale rendition. So of course I'd go for SVG first, and then perhaps I'd add a 1x scale and whatever down there in the different rasterized formats. That's a bit long-winded if all you want to do is output for one operating system. So I could click here for iOS, and you can see it does everything for me. It does me a 1, 2, and 3 times scaling for Retina, and it also gives me an SVG there as well, and there's nothing to stop me adding on the PDF for iOS 11. Android, because you've got about 5 different scalings there, because it works on a different system of SP instead of DIP and DP in there. There's a whole article on that you can find. Just search the term, what is SP unit, and you'll find all of that decoded for you. And from there, you just hit export. Now, up to that point, that is no different to save for web, apart from I can do 3 things at once there. But here's where this is important. If I decide I'm going to make a change here, right, I can simply activate that particular piece of content, right, and go in here and change it. So if I just isolate this one just for a minute, so drill down into that, and what I'm going to do here is change the color of this content. So I've got the color swatches from material here as well. A little bit unclear as to why that's not changing visually. Interesting. In that case, I'll just draw another thing on here. Oh, I know why now, because the layer's locked itself. So let me just add a new layer, and I'll draw a piece of content on there, and I'll add that to the panel as well. Okay, so I'll swap out and do that like that. Okay, so that's in there. If that now changes its color, you can see that it updates automatically in there, and that's the thing I'm trying to get across to you. Yeah, that save for web workflow is fine if you've got all day to do it. Yeah, but the thing is, you may well have all day to do it, but is that the best use of your time? Yeah, is sitting there just repeatedly invoking save for web profitable for you? I suspect probably not. Is it something that you find rewarding? Again, I suspect probably not. Yeah, so if you've not explored it already, do explore asset export here, because that way you're saving yourself a whole load of time, and when the changes come along, you don't need to fear them, because everything will update, and you just hit export again, and it updates the content that you've exported already, just overwrites it completely. But what I really do want to show you is Adobe Xd, which, how many of you have seen Xd before already? Yeah, so that's pretty good. There's a few of you already. So I'm going to use sort of a pre-baked thing in Blue Peter fashion here, just to show you this. So this is meant to be super, super fast. So unlike all of the things I mentioned earlier, which people have adapted to do their UI and UX work in, This was built from the ground up expressly for that purpose. It is meant to be lightweight. It is meant to be ultra fast. That's why I can pinch and zoom like that, and the rendering of that is instantaneous. You'll notice there's no lag. Yeah. In some cases, maybe we've got some rasterized content that might get a little tiny bit of extra lag, but it is overcome very, very quickly. Yeah. From there, much quicker than Illustrator or Photoshop will render it. And you'll notice there's no block rendering there either. It's the whole screen instantly. So very, very fast to work with, minimal UI. What we don't want to create with this particular product is something where you see a whole load of panels, 90% of which you're not going to be using at any one time, right? Because that's the truth in those things. You're using hardly any of all of that extra stuff. It's all there in case you need it, but what's the point in having it there if you're not using it? If you're not using the color guide, turn it off. If you're not using the swatches panel, turn it off. If you're not using Pathfinder, turn it off. All of those things. No point in having them there at all. So I've just got an extended panel out there. That's symbols. I'll come to that in a moment. And here on the right-hand side, I've got the context-sensitive properties panel, something which is being adapted into other products as well. In fact, Dreamweaver's had it since Macromedia days. So this is a fictitious app. Obviously, I'm not going along with the material guidelines here. I thought I'd make it a bit more colourful. This one with some gradients in it as well, because I'm retro and old school and I like gradients. So it's based on a food app, right, called Eats. When you get into Eats, you can decide one of these different things using these tiles. So I want to eat at a restaurant. I want some fast food. I want one of my favourites. Surprise me. Show me stuff I've ordered recently and show me stuff based on my location. And I'm going to view a profile at the top. In this section here, we're going to have a little map, and then we're going to have at least something for the fast food and possibly the restaurant food, depending on how we're doing. So I'm going to select this artboard to start off with, and I'm just going to drag a copy of that down here. And the idea I want here is I'm going to simulate in this journey the experience of signing in. So when the user sees the splash screen will then be defocused and a login bubble will appear on top of that. So to do that, I'm going to draw a rectangle. And in here, some of the shortcuts are similar to those in Illustrator. Some of them are different. So rectangle in here, for example, is R and not M as it is in Illustrator. But it's easy enough for you to decode those things. I'm going to turn on some background blur here. And then I'm just going to dial that up. Actually, I think I'll actually go for background blur itself. Okay, so I'm just going to dial up the blur there, and I can tune the brightness as well, and also the overall opacity of that too. And then I'll bring the bubble in like so. The bubble is actually a group here, so I'll just grab hold of that and bring that in and drop that on top like so. There we go, perfect. That will do just there. So the user gets hold of that, then they log in. I'll just name this screen here, log in, like so. And then they make their way out to this screen. Well, this one's pretty much finished. So what I'm going to do is just grab this stuff from the top here and copy it. So I've got hot dog menu there and title bar. Then I'm going to click on this artboard and paste. And you'll see it keeps the relative coordinates of the artboard as it drops the artwork down. And of course, a more efficient use of this would have been for me to turn it into a symbol, but as I'll do that shortly anyway, I'm not going to worry too much for now. So I could just replicate that across all of my artboards very quickly. What's meant to go on this screen here are nearby locations, and so I'm going to simulate that with a map. And in here, in my Finder, I've got this full screen map just here. And what I'm going to do is drag that in from the Finder. You can see that as I move it around, it's highlighting different places that can be dropped. And this here is being dropped onto the artboard, so I've got that. And Xd has a very capable drawing engine inside of it. You can paste Illustrator content in. You can actually paste content in from Sketch if you've got legacy stuff from Sketch, because a lot of people moved out to Sketch and are then finding themselves coming back because they've already got Adobe tools, so they're kind of exploring in this and working in this, this tool here. It is awesome. And so it understands the clipboard for both of those things. So the reason I showed you Illustrator to start off with, for example, is if you're developing stuff in there because you've got a whole load of other engines and tools that you can use to build stuff. You can just copy it out of there and drop it straight into XD. But I will draw something for you. So what I'm going to do here is draw an ellipse like so, same as you would on a desktop tool, holding down Shift just to create a constrained circle. And then with my selection tool, I'm just going to double click on that, and you'll see it gives me access to the Beziers here. So I said that funny, Beziers, but there we are. I'll double click on the one at the bottom here, and it converts it from being a curved point to a corner point like so. So it makes it very easy for me to draw a location marker. Then I'm going to give that a fill. So for example, I might want to go for kind of a red fill there like so. I'm just trying to balance out for the projection, but that's about as bright as I can get it. It's pretty bright. Just there, and I can save color swatches down here as well, you may well have noticed. So I can draw that just there. I'm going to turn the border off. I don't want a border. And now I'm going to draw another ellipse. So I'll just make my way to here, and just as I would in Illustrator, I'm going to hold down Alt and Shift to draw a constrained shape from the center outwards. And then I'll select both of those things. You'll notice, hopefully, that other options have become available at the top of the Properties Inspector, just here. So now it's said, right, okay, you've got more than one thing active. So it's turned off some other things, but my alignment options are here. And then my Boolean functions are here also. So I'm going to use a subtract Boolean, which knocks out the ellipse shape from the shape underneath it. And you'll notice that that remains illuminated. That's because it is still there. The ellipse is still there. If I needed to change anything about it, I can access that by double-clicking into the shape, and I can drill my way down to that particular ellipse, and I can model that still further without having to go back and redraw it. It's pretty much the same as making a compound shape in Illustrator, which of course you do by holding down the Alt or Option key. Rather than committing to that, you get the same visual effect from it. So I've got that the whole time there, and I might want to add something to it. I could, if I wanted to, add a bit of a shadow on there, which I've just done. And of course, if I was going to use this more than once, it would make sense for me to turn this into a symbol, which I simply do by tapping the plus just there like so. And then, of course, I can just bring as many of those in as I need to add those locations. Could have made that a bit smaller, but not to worry. Yeah, so we'll just pretend there are 2 restaurants in that area. So you get to see there how the drawing engine works. Then we'll come on to this section here. So this is where we're going to show what comes up in the results for fast food. And I've got this grid of objects just here. So there will be an image here, then there'll be a name, then a description, then a rating, and then different operations you can choose, like text me this, or call the restaurant, or share this location or restaurant with other people, that kind of thing. So I'll pick that up like so as a group, and then I'm going to turn that into a repeat grid by tapping repeat grid over on the side here. Okay. Once I've done that, you'll see I have handles to the right-hand side and to the bottom of this group. And if I pull out the handle on the right-hand side, you can see I can add more columns really, really easily. And XD recognizes gaps as an object. So if I wanted to move these around, or the gap between them, you can see I can simply mouse down and drag in there to change that gap. XD always gives you a numeric HUD, right? So you'll always see the numbers because, of course, they're important to you, and your devs are going to need to work to those numbers also. Okay, and you'll notice also if I just move something, well, in fact, I'll move another object in a minute, but you'll see as soon as I get close to another object, even if I'm using the arrow keys, it will persistently show me that value. So if I went over to the right-hand side here, for example, and start to use my arrow keys, can you see that now? If I zoom in for you, so this is selected, there you go, and as I do it, it's showing me proximity to that object in terms of space, and as I move upwards, then I'm getting exactly the value that I want from there. All right, I'll move that back into the center, and then I'm going to add some more rows. So, whoops, not going to rotate it. There we go. bring that down, add a few more rows just there. I think that will do. Let's go one more, just down to about there. Good. I think we're good there. Now I'm going to need the artboard to scroll here, so I'm just going to select the artboard and then pull down the artboard to the dimension that I'd like. Normally I'd leave some stuff for the chrome on the bottom there, but I'll just bring that up so it's nice and tight like that. Then it needs to be populated, and that's where I've got a stack of images inside of my project folder just here. So if I go to this fast food folder, you can see that I've got a bunch of different images pre-prepared here, okay, that I can use inside of that menu. And what I don't want to do, because it's laborious and it's a waste of everybody's time, is to select an object on my artboard and then use a place command to bring that in and then rinse and repeat that until the whole lot is exhausted. What I do want to do is select all of that content and drag it in and allow it to be populated on its own in one go. Okay, so I've got all of those items there now. I've also got a list of fast food here, okay, just a straightforward text list, not something in Word. That's really important because Word adds its own markup. It won't work with that. It needs to be a text file. But I've got a text file there, and I'm going to drag the text file in and on top of that word meal there, like so. If I can just get to that, and you'll see it populates all of those things. So again, if I've got that information, which I probably have from something like a spreadsheet, for example, I can just push that out and then drag that directly in, and it saves me any risk of miskeying any of that content as well, and it makes my work a lot faster. So you go through all of that and then you build out. I'm not going to bother with the restaurant food artboard there. I'll just get rid of that just for the purpose of this. But you'd carry on and you'd build out whatever it is you need to build. This is capable of holding on to hundreds of artboards. So you can develop as many as you want in here. You can even develop for all of the different platforms you're going to support in here. So if you want to do your phone, your tablet, and your desktop app in one place to save you moving assets between different project files, you can do all of that in here. Okay? You see the canvas, if I keep zooming right out, very, very big indeed, and it will expand to whatever you need it to be. Okay, so you do all of that, you build all of that side. That's kind of the first stage of UX work, as you probably well know, right? It's the iterative stage at the beginning where you're getting the design right and then you're kind of building that out. The next stage, of course, is prototyping. Now, if you're using something outside of the Creative Cloud ecosystem, what you've then got to do is move those assets via a plugin or otherwise into a prototyping tool. Now that in itself is a speed bump because you've got to kind of export a bunch of assets and then ingest them into that system. Not all, but in most of those systems you have to do that. Yeah. That means if anything changes, and that's what I want you to bear in mind, you've got to go back, do that, re-export it, re-ingest it, and potentially wire the whole thing back up again. The experience in XD is somewhat different. I can, if I want to, as I have just done, use a Control-Tab shortcut. That's the same on both platforms, Windows 10 and the Mac OS, Control-Tab here. And you'll see at the top of the screen, it switches to prototype. And also, a lot of the interface disappears. Because in prototyping mode, all of those design tools have no meaning, so we don't show them. It is that simple. Yeah? Only need to see what you need to do the job. And that here is effectively a selection tool. You'll see that things, now if I go to this screen here, for example, when I click on an object, here I've clicked on an artboard, that it has a loop off to the side, it's like a hook, and I can drag that down to this artboard just here, and so I'm wiring that up. And so this tells me a few things here. Firstly, the target. If you've got 300 artboards inside of this project, what you don't want to do is be trying to tag it up to something that you can't clearly see. So you can drag this to whatever the nearest object is and then target it from here really easily. So we did think about how we were building this, right, to make it useful. Then you've got transitions, so all of course, CSS3 transitions, so that gives you another idea of where this will end up eventually. Not at the moment, but where it's kind of going. So I've got all of the different transitions I can use here. I'll stick with dissolve, and then easing methods. So ease in, ease out, ease in and out, yeah, which I think I'll just have a bit of easing in there, so it'll start, and then a duration. So that's where the user goes. So it goes off to here, and then the user logs in. So what I'll do is I'll actually double-click into this group, which gives me access to the content, and then I'll drag a wire across to this screen here. I'm going to click on the artboard as well. I'll just have this one so this one slides up, I think. I'll choose any, but you could choose actually next time. And I'm going to click on the artboard because I also want to specify this as being the home screen as well. Okay? And that's as simple as activating that tab. Then the user will click on a tile. Now, of course, I've only wired up a couple of the tiles here, but I'm going to go to this fast food tile. Of course, I could go down to the object, but as you can see there, a larger target makes it more usable. Yeah, so you don't have to concentrate so much on where you're clicking. There's a brilliant military phrase that goes along with that I've always remembered when I'm doing this, and the phrase is, the time taken to acquire a target is a function of the distance to and size of the target, which in plain speak means if it's the size of a barn and you're quite close to it, the chances are you're going to hit it, no matter how bad a marksman you are, right? So that's the thing, having a larger target makes it easier to use. And I'll drag that one off to there. This one I'll have that so it slides left for no reason whatsoever. And I'll also go to the map and take that out to the map screen like so. Now, if you're eagle-eyed, you will have noticed that there's something I haven't done there. And just so you know, it's on purpose. Yeah. If you don't know what it is, that's fine, because it will be revealed in a moment. But there is something in two places, actually, I haven't done something, okay? So I'd do that, I'd go through, I'd wire everything up, and you can see it's very, very simple, very interactive for me to do that. And now I'm going to come up to this play icon at the top here. Now, if you ever used any of our products like Animate, if you've used the EPUB functionality in InDesign, you'll know that you can use a shortcut to activate a preview of that. And we've carried that across in here. So you can click the icon if you want, but you can also hit Command-Enter there, and you've got something that you can see straight away here, and you can interact with it. In fact, if I go to this artboard inside of the prototype, then it fits to the live window like so, and then I can click here. So this is a nice way for me to actually see my journey, and so I'll go type, and then I'd do my password there, and you can see the transition taking effect, and then I might look at the location just there. Does anybody see where the problem is yet? Yeah, right, there's no way out. I've worked myself down into a corner. But like I said, I did that on purpose because, again, if I was working in a disconnected system, I would have a real problem there, right? Because then I'd have to go back out, I'd have to create new graphics, re-ingest the whole lot into this system, yeah, and then carry on from there. This is XD. I don't have to do that. What I can do is just switch back into design mode here. Let me just zoom in on the top of the map there. Okay, and I'll draw a rectangle like so. Similar controls to Illustrator. So you've got corner widgets there. Yeah, if you needed to change the corner radius, you can do that interactively like so. Yeah, you can also rotate the thing around. So you see if I hover near to corner, yeah, then I can just drag that around. I can hold shift to constrain that as well. As you've already seen, yeah, I can use the selection tool here and double click on items here. I can also delete an anchor point, all with the same tool. You'll notice the complete absence of a direct selection or group selection tool in there. Not needed, right? You can do them all by indicating what you want by the number of clicks or taps that you make with it. And then I could bring that in like so. Actually, that kind of needs rotating around that way, doesn't it? So if I just give them a really large, and I apologize for the crudeness of this particular item, but it's doing its job. And you've already seen here now that it's arrived inside the prototype window. If you haven't noticed that, I'll just wobble it around. There you go. There you go. It's like a budget version of Dad's Army. Yeah, with its little triangle going on there. Very low budget version of Dad's Army. And then I'll switch into prototype mode, and then I will wire that up across to this screen, and then I'll click on that there like so. And so now I have got a way out. Yeah. Directly from there, I can now click. Whoops, well, I haven't got one out just there, but that's fortunate for me. All I need to do, switch into design mode, copy that, go across to this artboard and paste. Whoops, didn't activate the artboard. And paste, and it pastes it in exactly the same location, so I don't have to fiddle it around to make sure that it goes in it. Remember, relative coordinates, so it just knows exactly where it's meant to go. And then switch to prototyping mode just there, and wire that up so that jumps where I want that to go. Now, as it happens, that hasn't gone to the right place, and I ignored the screen, so I'll just pull that, I'll go to here, and this time I'll change that back to home, just there, and there's the wire going across. Some people get comfortable when they see all of the wires going on all the time. In order to facilitate that, all you have to do is select everything, and it will show you all of the wiring. But I digress. I went back out to here, and then I could click on here, and if I need to get back out of there, then I can do that like so. I'll go back to the fast food, because this is the one where I've got some scrolling, okay, so I can see how that would look. And maybe one of my colleagues turns around to me, and my colleague says, you know, they're not big on squares, this particular customer, because with squares, it kind of looks like, I'm just signing in, by the way, at the same time as doing this, so excuse me if the phone beeps. I forgot I was signed out of this particular app. Yeah, they're not particularly big on squares. What they'd rather have circles, because they're not pointing you away from the content. That's an interesting school of thought, right? That squares actually direct you. They're 4 arrows directing you away from the content. So what I can do here, again, in another system, I'd have to go back in and make edits. But here I can go back into design, double click onto that particular part of that group, which gives me access to it, and I can change those to circles like so, and they change inside of the prototype at the same time. Yeah. So you can see it is very, very interactive way of working, and frees you up from a whole load of things when all you need to do is to just switch back into a different mode, and then you can work with it. Well, that's fine in itself, and being able to share that as in that way, in that thing there is great. But what if I'm working with somebody who's further away? Yeah. What if I need to show this to somebody on the other side of the world? Well, I can record it as a movie. What I'm going to do is go back to the splash screen here in design mode, and then I'm going to click this icon at the top of the window here, and then I'll just work through the journey, right? So I'd click here, and then I'd type, and I'd click here, and then it would take me through to this, and I'd click on the location, see what's there, and then I'd click here, then I'd look at the fast food, that sort of thing, and I'll stop that just there, like so. And if I pop out to the Finder, then you can watch that movie just there. So let me just get out onto the desktop. Not used to doing it by clicking. There you go. And if I just preview that. So you can see that it's visualizing my touches. Like so. So I could describe how that works. Okay. Pop back out to here. Something else I can do. So if I'm in the room with the people, something else I can do is actually send this to the Xd app on my device. So if I tap here, okay, this should, in a second, if my app is on, let me just get in there. There we are. I'm still not signed in. Oh, I am. I'm signed in as someone else. That's going to be an epic fail. All right, I'll do that while I'm going over the next bit. But it will show me that on the device, and I can interact with that in exactly the same way. I can also, I don't have to be tethered to it to use it. It should synchronize for me automatically when you're signed in as the same person. Yeah. And then you can just unplug that, take it with you to the meeting, and that's a great way to let the client test it out for themselves and see how they work with it. If you actually want to go into a model of testing, Xd also supports that. So just here I have this share icon, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to share this again. I'm just going to pop back out to my Finder, because in my EATSAP folder just here I've got this PNG file that's meant to be the icon for this particular application, and I'll drag that into that window like so. Okay, and then I'm going to make this a brand new link just here and allow commenting. So if I tap new link, what this will do, and I don't know, I haven't tested anything going upwards on this network just yet. So that's good. I'll copy the link to my clipboard and I'll go back out. That's why that's acting up, isn't it? Okay. And I'll just open Chrome, and I'll very quickly get those windows down into the dock, create a new window, paste that link, and let that connect. Okay, so that's opening up in Chrome. There's the, it's gone to the artboard that I was at previously. Ideally, what I should have done is focused on the main artboard to start with, but I haven't wired this up for many routes out of here. But there's the icon that I dragged in, and then I can experience this in exactly the same way. You can see that I can scroll up and down here. I can test things out, so that arrow's not wired up. For example, here's the one that I drew. Here's the one out to the map, just there. And that means that people can actually test it. Yeah. We can give them all of the models that they need to test against. So show me how you would discover food at a fast food restaurant, for example. And then they can comment on how that journey works for them, because that's what this field here is for. Okay. Also, by the way, if you send someone the link to this, it's not a publicly discoverable link. You can see it's got a reasonable degree of encryption in the URL anyway. It's not the sort of thing you're going to come up, and none of those things are listed on Google, so you're not going to find it, or any other search engine for that matter. You're not going to find it accidentally. You would have to give someone the link in order for them to use it. Okay, so if you distribute that link, and you could bit link that, there's nothing to stop you doing that if you wanted to do that also. If you send that to them and they view it on a device that matches the profile of your work, yeah, so for example, iPhone 6 here, if I sent that to somebody who viewed it on an iPhone 6, it goes into full screen mode. It doesn't just do it, right, because otherwise that would be alarming for them as a user. They get a really big bubble that they have to dismiss before they continue that tells them how to get out of it. And basically you long press on the screen and it gives you the choice to either switch, because you might have several things for them to look at, switch out to another one, yeah, or to exit from there. But it's handy that it does that, and especially if you're testing across several different things and you have those inside of the same document. It means the same person, if they've got a phone and a tablet, they can actually test that out for themselves on both things and see it pretty much as close to the experience as they're likely to get. Okay, so I can test that from here, then I can add something as a comment here, so I'm not going to be very elaborate. I'm just going to put nice in there and hit that through. I'm commenting on my own work again, which is a little bit uncomfortable, but I can't exactly get one of you to come down, sign in and do it, to be fair. And you can see I've got a thread of comments here that I'll be able to see. This uses the Creative Cloud notification system. My notifications are turned off because I don't want to get any texts from my wife or anything while I'm in the middle of talking to you. Of course, that would be dreadfully unprofessional. I'm not saying it hasn't happened before, because it has. I've forgotten on more than one occasion. Fortunately, it's only been relatively R-rated stuff like bring wine, yeah, or something like that. Could have been worse. Or cat pictures of my cats. Anyway, so that's a really handy thing to do. You can, or shortly, very, very shortly, like imminently, you can actually add annotations at an object level as well. Yeah, so you can pin an annotation to a particular object or interaction. Okay, so you've got a way there. You can test that amongst a bunch of people. You can get their feedback straight away from there. You can see I've got the chance to resolve that and mark it as being resolved, which of course, if they refresh, they then got the choice. Well, it would refresh for them anyway and tell them, because of the Creative Cloud notification system, would tell them that the item's been resolved. And then they could have a look at that again and see if that then met their particular criteria. All you would then need to do from Xd, okay, is to export the assets, which you can see there's a command here. It works in a very similar way to the way that it works in Illustrator, apart from it's indicative, right? In that if you have nothing selected, it will export you images of all of the artboards at the renditions that you want them for. If you have content on artboards selected, then it will export all of those pieces as discrete parts of content. Yeah, so it will take each group and export them as separate items, and you've got exactly the same renditions in XD, apart from the SVG part just at the moment. I don't think we've switched that on yet, but the very fact that I said that means that it's coming. Oh, it is there now, so that's cool. Actually, thinking about it, I'll just remember that has been there a little while. So you can export all of that content from there. Then your dev's got something to work to. They've got all the content, and they do all of the stuff that they need to do as well. But as I indicated, everything in here works. This is actually built in HTML and CSS anyway. It's one of the things like Felix, Project Felix, which I'm showing later on today, built exactly the same way, right? So we're not compiling it in the way that we've done our apps historically. It is compiled, but essentially driven by HTML and CSS and JavaScript, which makes it super, super lightweight and very, very extensible. So that concludes with just under 3 minutes to go. That concludes your tour, your whip round tour of XD. If you haven't used it yet, I do hope that you'll give it a go. If you've got Creative Cloud, then you've already got XD. Unless you're in an enterprise environment and you have it switched off, if you're in an enterprise environment and your administrator hasn't allowed it, then go and tell them if you see value in it, which I'm sure you must do, really. I don't meet many people who don't. Then tell them what they could be saving and what you could be doing with it, and get them to turn it on. And if they have a problem with that, if you're an enterprise customer, then get them to talk to your customer success manager, and they'll talk to me, and I'll go talk to them. And no one says no to me. Yeah. All right. That's not true. Actually, loads of people say no to me all the time, but I was just having a big up moment. All right. Thanks ever so much for watching. If you've got any questions, now's a good time to ask them. We've got a couple of minutes. Yes? You just create a new artboard. So there's an artboard tool here if you need it. Yeah, and wherever you click is where the artboard will be generated. So if I click above this artboard, for example, it adds an artboard above. If I click to the left, it adds an artboard to the left, and so on. And then you just target the artboard, and you've got a whole range of different profiles over on the side here. Yeah, so you just go for one of those profiles, or if those profiles don't meet your immediate needs. So for example, we did some work with a couple of our gaming partners, and they wanted to do stuff for television, and we didn't have that, and so they just created their own profile for TV. Yep, so everything's in one place. Yeah, and then you can use all of those other, I didn't really dig into the symbols and colours and everything, but you could see that they were all there. The layers hierarchy in here is different also, so rather than in Illustrator where you see all of the layers on all the time, this only shows you them in the context of where you're working. Yeah, so you'll see if I target a particular artboard and go to another artboard, you can see that that's in there. If I target a piece of content in here, can you see how it filters that down? So I can just see the component parts of that group, which is a really nice way to drill down into the content. Additionally, one thing I didn't mention, I'll take another question in a second, but one thing I didn't mention in here is that we have UI kits for iOS and Windows built in. So if I needed one for Windows, then that iOS, oh, actually, we've moved them all to offline now. I thought we still kept that one inside. But anyway, they're there. Google Material just takes you out to the Google Material website, and then you can just download the sticker sheet, which they do for Illustrator, Sketch, Photoshop, and Xd off there, so you can get all of those things. Right, where's the next question? Mark?
What's the best way to adapt this for different devices?
The best way to adapt it? Well, you don't have to, really. You just resize your content to suit the device. It's that simple. Create a new artboard, push the content onto it.
So you're going to do it for 5 different profiles?
Or more, yeah. It's not, well, Android, because Android's like all over the shop with whatever. Yeah, however many ways you can cut up economically for your own business a sheet of Gorilla Glass, which is the determining thing in many of these. It's not actually the cabinet or the components. It's actually the Gorilla Glass that they want to do. Right? How are we going to cut that up? And then they kind of work. It's like a Bond movie. They give it a release date, yeah, and then they work backwards from there. It's like that. Right, we've got this much glass. How much money you got? Let's cut it up into these things. Yeah, yeah. So yeah. Any more? Yes.
When it comes to like exporting these elements for the developers to use,
Yep.
what kind of format are they expecting to receive?
That's entirely between you and your developers. They will ask for one or the other. They will either ask, typically they'll ask for a PNG, yeah. But if they're working for iOS 11, they're going to start asking for PDF, yeah, or they'll ask for SVG, because SVG gives them the most flexibility, and that's partly what the SVGs are actually normally wrapped inside the PDF for vector work. So that's why Apple are moving to that direction, mainly because theirs have a certain proportional arrangement. There are only 3 proportional arrangements for iOS, and so they all fit into that, so they all scale nicely in there. Yeah. Yes?
Say you've got 50 different artworks, and then you forgot to put this artwork that links to the homepage. Do you have to actually copy-paste the artwork into 50 artworks and then link it to the homepage?
Yeah, as you saw there, it's very, very flexible. You don't have to stop doing anything, even when you're in the middle of a prototype. Yeah, you can just literally paste stuff across, move stuff across, redraw stuff, delete, re-add. Anything you want to do, it is that flexible. Yeah, now that actually is something, that is the only way to do that manually, unfortunately. Yeah. That unless you've got a symbol there which you can replace with those things, that's one way of doing it. But it is lacking a paste on all artboards command. The reason for that, as I understand it, and this is not a direct quote that you'd actually have to ask the engineers, is because people can work for all their different supported platforms inside of one document, that's where the relative page geometry may change. And so it might not suit. So the complexity they've got there is if you've got phone with tablet with desktop at the same time, you would want to paste on a specific subset of those artboards potentially. Do you see what I mean? So that's probably why that isn't there at the moment. But that's a really good segue into something else. I'm going to take this question. Can you just hold that thought for a minute? Yeah. Go on.
It's just following on the collaboration with developers.
Yep.
Say if you was to make further amendments to the artwork,
Yep.
is there a way of then being able to receive that live update in the same file?
So synchronous working is something that's very, very interesting. So some other platforms support that, where people can work on the same file synchronously from different locations. That isn't in Xd yet, but you can bet that will be on the roadmap at some point. Yeah. So, and that's the way to do it. The other way you can do it, and whether I don't know, and I'm going to run out of time. Well, I actually am out of time, but the Creative Cloud mechanism allows for assets to be pulled down from the browser, so it may well support that at some point in the future. Very quickly, and I'm so sorry I'm a couple of minutes over, the best thing for you to do, if you want something inside of this that isn't there, or you want to find out if it's coming along, is to go to Xd and go to its user voice page, where you've got this provide feedback, and this takes it to the user voice page, and you can see exactly what's going on in there. This is the most transparent project at Adobe. Yeah, and you can also see how by voting on things, features that people have asked for, how they get escalated through engineering. Yeah, so if you want paste on all artboards, that topic will be in here. You can search for it just there and then add your weight to that. and that will escalate its priority. All right. I'm sorry I'm a couple of minutes over. Go off to your next sessions. I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks ever so much, all. Thank you. Thanks. Ta.